comes with having sponsorship, it is also really good for me and Michelle as well, just to receive that kind of support from institutions and from groups like CDEG as well. It helps you to sort of know that maybe you're doing the right thing and that this does have a wider support as well. So one more slide. And we also want to thank you as our attendees for donating to our 2 chosen charities. So we waived any registration fee for the event, but we have invited people to either already or in future donate to our 2 chosen charities. These are both small charities that are based in Coventry. Coventry Pride, alongside running the annual Coventry Pride event, they also do huge amounts of community support with the LGBT plus community in Coventry. So things like holding coffee mornings, doing public awareness, supporting people, and running a helpline as well. So they're a really great charity to support. Our other chosen charity is very, very local to the university. It's literally about 2 minutes away from the library front door, and that's Coventry Boys and Girls Club. They work with some of the most vulnerable children in the most deprived wards in Coventry by providing opportunities for those children to take part in sporting activities, artistic activities, creative opportunities, events out for different places, and they also provide a safe space for those children who might not always have one at school or at home by providing contact with youth workers and providing that sort of safe space. So we really, really support those, and we would like anyone, if they want to consider and if they can afford to also look at donating to those 2 charities.
Okay, just to introduce you to who is going to be around and helping with the conference today. So there's obviously me and Darren. We are the conference co-organisers. But because of the multiple strands and the multiple things going on, obviously we can't be everywhere at once, just as we wouldn't be able to be in person. So the other people joining us are part of our library team. So we have Becky Collins, who's actually here at the moment. So hi, Becky. And also Holly, who is here at the moment as well. Maria King, who I don't know if she's here, but she will be around. She doesn't have that colour hair at the moment, but is very representative of the rest of her face. Suzanne White, and also Lauren Bell. So if at any time you need anything, please do get in touch with one of the members of staff. There will always be one of us in the water cooler room, but for moderating each of the sessions, you might not find me or Darren, but it will be one of our colleagues. Okay, just a little bit about navigating the conference. So a quick update on the programme. Unfortunately, during our last session today, Catherine has had to cancel as she's still feeling unwell, which obviously very understandable, and really unfortunate that she's had to cancel, because that would have been a really great session, but we wish her well and hope she gets better soon. We're also unfortunately unable to have Hina join us today. She was going to deliver the Read at Leicester session later on today. But instead of Hina presenting live, she has been able to do a recording of her session for us. So if you come to that session, it will be a live recording. Live recording? That's not a thing. Anyway, it will be. We'll play a recording for you, and obviously you won't be able to ask Hina any questions, but you will still be able to see that presentation. Okay, a little bit about the rest of the conference and how it works. So using the Big Blue Button rooms. You're all in a Big Blue Button room, so you're obviously able to get into one, so that's great. You can see the public chat, so the public chat is for anybody in the conference to be able to see it. If you want to privately message anyone, you can click on their name in this list of users on the left-hand side, and you'll see additional options to privately message someone, and that will come up under your public chat on the left-hand side of the screen. We also have the shared notes function. So in any session, if you want to take notes collaboratively with other attendees, you can click on where it says shared notes and take notes collaboratively. Just to say about the public chat versus private chat, in each and every session, the moderator will identify themselves and ask you to privately message them with any questions that you have for the Q&A. That's so that the presenter and attendees aren't distracted by the public chat, because it is quite distracting as you go on. So if you have any questions, for example, during Quinn's keynote, which is coming up next, you will need to privately message me, and I will save those questions and ask Quinn the questions during the Q&A at the end. As for troubleshooting, the best thing to do if you're having any issues with any of the audio, if you go into a big blue button room and you can't hear anything, or you're hearing echo, crackle, whatever you're hearing, the best thing to do is just log out and then log back in. It's very much as simple as that. We've found that solves like 99% of the problems. I'll just scroll back up on the public chat as well. You can join any meeting by phone. So if you find that your internet goes down or there's any issue with hearing stuff, you can dial into a meeting. So the phone number always stays the same, but the conference pin will change for each and every session. So you'll just need to see what the conference pin is, dial into the meeting by phone, and then use whatever the conference pin is for the session. If you need to drop in and out, obviously we understand that everyone's got different responsibilities throughout the day. We will be recording every session and hope to make those available probably on our website over the next couple of weeks. We have a water cooler room available, and that is I think the top big blue button room once you log into Open Moodle. That is for anyone to hang out, to network, to have a chat. There'll be someone in there all day, whether that's me, Darren, or one of our colleagues. If you have any issues, any problems, you can also come and ask us in there. If there's any announcements, anything kind of big that happens that we need to tell you all about, we'll post it on the announcement forum, which will also trigger an email to all of you. We will very much try and avoid doing that if at all possible, because we don't want to spam you with loads of emails throughout the day. Instead, we'd ask that you use the forum. So if you want to start a thread about a session that you've just been to and really want to chat about it further, if you want to go and introduce yourself, anything like that, please use the forum. We'd also really encourage you to use the hashtag, which is Calc2020, all one word, and the 2020 is the numbers rather than spelling it out. And if you want to tag us on Twitter, we're also, Darren is Patched Elbows, all one word, and I am Lib Michelle, L-I-B and Michelle, 2 L's. So yeah, please let us know what you think throughout the day, and yeah, keep in touch.
So I just wanted to remind everybody that we are an online conference now, but the Code of Conduct does still apply. Code of Conduct is really, really important to me and Michelle, because it makes sure that the conference is a safe space for everybody, that everybody feels free to express themselves and also to attend sessions without feeling at all at risk. The Code of Conduct was the first thing that we set up when we were designing the conference, and as attendees and as people that were on the mailing list, all of the people that were involved in Calc had a big part in actually crafting that and putting it all together. So hopefully you've had a look at it already. I'll just post a link to it in the chat. Basically, the overall thing is just to treat everybody with respect and kindness. If anybody should ever feel like anybody has breached the code, and that includes whether it's in a big blue button room, whether it's in a forum, whether it's on any online spaces attached to the conference, such as use of the hashtag, you can report that to myself or Michelle when we're in the water cooler room via a private message. You can also email us on the Calc email address, calc@coventry.ac.uk. And I've also emailed out a form for everybody if you should want to do an anonymous report, so that you can send it through on that form, and then that will go to me and Michelle without having your name attached to it. So you've got those three options to report stuff. Okay.
Cool. That is it for our welcome, and we've done it perfectly on time as well without rehearsing. Woo. Okay, so we're going to stop sharing our webcams now, and I'm going to mute myself for a moment so that I can get Quinn's slides uploaded, and then we will hand over to Quinn for the first keynote. See you all later. Okay, hi everyone. So this is Michelle. We are ready to get started with our first keynote of the day from Quinn. Just a reminder that if you have any questions for Quinn during his Q&A, please privately message me. So you can see me, I should be the top user in the users on the left-hand side of the screen. If you click on my name, you should see the option to privately message me. I will be collecting your questions throughout the keynote and asking them of Quinn on your behalf at the end of the session. Reminder too that there's also the shared notes facility. So if you want to collaboratively make notes, I will be saving those at the end as well. And we will somehow make those available to you as well. Okay, so I'd like to start by introducing Quinn. So Quinn Roache is an expert practitioner in equality, human rights and inclusive employment. He's the policy officer leading on LGBT plus and disability policy work at the Trades Union Congress. His recent work includes a groundbreaking quantitative examination of LGBT workers' experiences of sexual harassment and an in-depth analysis of the disability employment and pay gaps. In post, Quinn has led national campaigns, including for Trans Awareness Week, to show how all trade unionists can be trans allies, to extend equal marriage to Northern Ireland, to improve understanding of the social model of disability, streamlining the use of disability reasonable adjustments passports. Previously, he worked for the Equality and Human Rights Commission on high-profile projects, including their pregnancy and maternity work programme, which examined workplace discrimination directed at pregnant women and new mothers, and the Home Care Inquiry, which looked at how older people were treated when receiving home care. He also led national influencing work, including within Parliament, to extend human rights protection to home care. Quinn also led on community engagement projects on a variety of themes, including the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and increasing LGBT plus hate crime reporting. He's also an active volunteer on the organising team of UK Black Pride as a trade union engagement officer. So I think you can all join us in really welcoming Quinn. We're really lucky to have him here with us today. Let me just find him so I can pass over to Quinn and let him get on with his keynote.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me and see me? Just look at the public. Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you, Darren and Michelle, for inviting me here. And Michelle, thank you for that introduction. It's interesting to hear all the things you've done, read back to you, and to remind you of some of the good work you've done. So thank you very much. I won't have the video camera on for very long. I just thought it would be really nice for everyone to kind of see me and note that I put on a collared t-shirt or a collared shirt for the first time in 2 months in kind of acknowledgement of being here and celebration of being able to talk to you about some of my work. As you've heard, my name is Quinn and my pronouns are he, him. And I work at the TUC, and I've done so for just over 2 years. So if you bear with me, I will just take off the cam and ensure that you can see my screen. Okay, great. So at the TUC, I work in a small team. There's myself, and I lead on LGBT plus and disabled workers' rights. There's my colleague, Sean Elliott, and she is the women's officer. And I also have a colleague named Wilf Sullivan, who's our race equality officer. And our roles is really to advance equality for workers in our respective areas and to improve and ensure life outcomes are better for working people. So as you've heard, I've worked for the TUC for just over 2 years. But before that, I worked for the Equality and Human Rights Commission for 11. And the Equality and Human Rights Commission are the UK's national regulator for equality and human rights. And I guess I just kind of give that introduction to say that my entire professional career has been focused on equality and human rights and campaigning for positive change in those areas. And what I wanted to really do today was to use my time here to talk about campaigning for change and how we can use our evidence to build momentum to create a movement and generate the change that we need. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to quickly tell you a bit about the TUC, trade union activism, campaigning for change, and I'm going to use 2 of my recent pieces of work to do that. I'm going to talk about the Disability Employment and Pay Gap, an LGBT sexual harassment report that I've done. I think any presentation during this period should also be used to look at COVID-19 and what is being done to address the kind of pandemic, both for equality groups and workers more generally. And I'll quickly touch upon that, and then I'll take Q&As. And just to say, I still don't know why I've used this tree on the right-hand side. It is a tree, and it's knitted in rainbow colors, and I guess I just thought it was beautiful. So I've got a tree here, no particular reason, but it's just nice. So just to tell you a bit about the TUC, we exist to make the working world better, a better place for everybody. And we were founded in 1868. And that means we've existed for roughly 152 years. And what happened in 1868 was a group of trade unionists from across the UK. They gathered in Manchester and they held their first meeting, their first trades union congress. And that was at the Mechanics Institute. And at that Congress, they passed a resolution, and it said that it is highly desirable that the trade unions of the United Kingdom should hold an annual Congress for the purpose of bringing trades in closer alliance and to take action in all parliamentary matters pertaining to the general interests of the working classes. And that's essentially what we've done. And over the years, the TUC has grown, and we've established ourselves as a voice of trade unions in the United Kingdom. And our job, it's really to support trade unions, to stand up for everyone who works for a living, to advocate for collective bargaining, and we also help union members get on in life through running and managing learning and skills programs. So that's just a bit about who we are and the organization that I work for. It's got quite a long history and a proud one. Now, trade unionism and trade union activism. Now, I think most of the public feel they have an idea of who trade unions are and what they do. And chances are that's been informed by what you've seen in the media, and that's focused on work. And that will have probably been trade unions taking industrial action, like strikes, or unions representing members in or on contentious issues, and unions bargaining for their members to have better pay, conditions, and health and safety, and doing it collectively. And you know what? Darn right, that's absolutely what we do. No ifs, ands, or buts. When our members tell us that they are being treated badly, and we aren't able to agree with an employer fair treatment of our members, we'll take the appropriate steps to protect them. But that isn't all we do, and I just wanted to focus today on a bit more about the rest of what makes us a movement and brings us together. So our work is wider than the workplace. We work at the grassroots, regional, and national levels to improve the lives of working people. And this includes, for example, campaigning to change universal credit. The campaign is specifically that it's stopped and scrapped and replaced with a benefit that isn't based on sanctions, and challenging the narrative of the far right. And if there's one thing you can take away from this particular slide, it's that we're values-led, and our value-led movement is based on solidarity, and we uphold our democratic principles, and we do so within the 21st century, addressing 21st century issues. And to do that, our work is really centered on research and advocacy for marginalized, underrepresented, and disenfranchised workers. And sort of the research and advocacy and campaigning that we do really creates outcomes beyond what individual workplaces or professional bodies could achieve. And that's because it's really based on and in solidarity. And when we as a movement take action and use our voice, we are speaking on behalf of 5.6 million trade unionists across the country when we do so collectively. So we do have a bit of clout in this area. And just to really, I feel like I should really just emphasize that we are led by our members. They tell us there are issues and we look to address them. Now, I'm going to talk to you about priorities for equality programs that I've been working on. But before I get into that, I need to set out the principles and processes I use when I kind of identify priority issues and areas, when I think that I or the TUC should speak on behalf of our members, how we develop our policy and recommendations, and how we advocate for change. And I'm going to stress this point because I think there are a lot of organizations that get it wrong. And the principle fundamentally is nothing about us without us. I hope that some of you have heard that slogan. It's one of the key slogans of the disability movement. And what I'm trying to say when I say this is that I do not make decisions on or about campaigning without the input of members, and specifically those members whose experiences I want to improve. And I choose what to research based on intelligence provided by those members. Trade unionism is based in democracy, and that's one of our core values, and it informs everything we do. So to ensure we get and hear the best intelligence on issues, for example, facing disabled workers or LGBT workers or women or BME workers, we have an annual motions-based 2-day conference for each group. And those conferences bring together 250 trade union members from all walks of life, regions and sectors, and from across our affiliated unions. And at these 2-day conferences, members debate and agree what the key issues are facing them, and they elect an advisory committee for each group to help shape and inform the TUC's work program for that year. And the truth is, I know of very few organizations that have similar setups to trade unions. And that doesn't mean other organizations are wrong. But what I would say is if you see research about a group that hasn't involved that group, I think that should raise alarms. So the TUC has legitimacy to conduct research and speak on behalf of members, campaign and advocate for change, because we've been given that remit by our members. And I think sometimes discussing our democracy can be a bit hard to understand. So what I've included here on the right of the slide is a picture from the TUC's 2019 LGBT+ conference. And this picture was taken during a debate on hate crime. And I really just included it on the slide to kind of help everyone understand a bit about what it literally looks like. And I hope that's made sense. Now, I'm going to tell you a bit about my research, policy and campaigning work, looking at the disability employment and pay gaps next. And that was a priority that was identified at the 2018 and 2019 Disabled Workers Conference. So again, just to show that we're led by our members. So disability employment and pay gaps is kind of a real issue for disabled workers. And to understand them both, what we did was we conducted a 4-quarter analysis of the labor force survey. Specifically, we looked at, email alert. Specifically, we looked at July to September 2018 to April to June 2019. And what we found was that disabled people experience significant barriers to getting in and keeping jobs. And the report that I've done really shows that disabled people face double discrimination. Not only are they less likely to have a paid job, but when they do, disabled people earn substantially less than their non-disabled peers. And the research, it found that the current employment gap is roughly 30%. So that is, non-disabled people's employment rate is around 80%, and disabled people's employment rate is around 50%. And kind of, we did a comparison looking at the employment rate for last year, and what we found was that this represents a 0.8% increase in the number of disabled people employed compared to the year before. And what that means is that if this rate of change continues, it will take another 37 years for the pay gap, for the employment gap to close. If you look at the historic government's kind of ambitions and aims in this, I think they initially said they were going to halve the employment gap in a year, and then they changed it to getting 1 million more disabled people in work by 2027. And basically what our research shows is that is not going to happen. That was a dream, and they're not going to reach their target. I can't get into too much detail here, but also I would also just point out that the employment gap varies significantly between groups of disabled people with different impairments. But as I've only got 40 minutes, I won't get too much into that detail. So what we did was we launched a report into the disability employment and pay gap, and we did that last year on the 4th of November. And there's a reason we chose that date, and that's because that's the day disabled workers effectively stop being paid for the year. And what it means is that disabled workers work for 57 days a year for free. And so what we did was we kind of posed a question to anyone hearing about the research. And that was, would you work for 57 days a year for nothing? And what you have on your slide here are 2 pieces of content we created to help drive and move this campaign forward. So the actual pay gap is 15.5%. And while I'm able to tell you when the employment gap will close, and that's a very upsetting time indeed, I cannot tell you when the pay gap will close, because when we did a comparison with the last 12 months, what we found was that the gap had increased by 0.3%. So it had not shrunk, it had increased. And I think one of the reasons for this is that although the government have committed to halving the employment gap, they almost never talk about the pay gap. They don't discuss it at all. And what the 15.5% pay gap means is that on average, disabled workers earn £1.65 less an hour than their non-disabled counterparts. And annually, this is equivalent to over £3,000. It's actually £3,003 less a year. And that's based on someone working a 35-hour week. But what we do in the trade union movement is we actually, I think numbers, percentages, they don't really mean much if you don't contextualize them. So what does £3,000 a year less mean? Well, £3,000 would buy you 11 months of the average household food expenditure, or it would buy you 9 months of fuel and power, or it would buy you 8 months of transport. And those are kind of based on average household expenditures when we looked at some data produced by the ONS. So you can see that actually £3,000 is a massive underpayment and has a real impact on disabled workers' lives. And what I can also tell you is that the pay gap also varies by impairment, and it is also varied between men and women. And I hope you've heard that, but what it means for disabled women is that they earn 25.9% less than non-disabled men. So I think it's quite a complicated issue, and when you get into it, there's a lot of nuance, but ultimately the thing you should take away is that it's massive. Now, again, earlier I said that what trade unions do is that we try and make things real and contextualize them. So to kind of further understand the impacts of the pay gap on the lives of disabled workers, we looked and did a separate survey on the effects financial stress had on disabled workers. And we did a kind of a poll, and we had a strong enough sample of disabled workers to really draw sound statistical conclusions. And it was for anyone over the age of 16 in either full-time or part-time work. Now, what we found was that disabled workers were more likely than non-disabled peers to go without basic amenities. So they would go without heating on a cold day or without food, and they would do so when they were short on money. It also found that disabled workers are more likely to resort to going without basics than other workers. This survey really found that disabled workers were more negatively affected by financial stress than non-disabled workers, and that disabled workers were 3 times as likely to ask for outside assistance from a charity or a community organization compared to non-disabled workers. And we still see that being replicated during the current crisis. So recent research from ONS said that disabled workers or disabled people were 3 times as likely to rely on food banks. So reports of this nature are only really relevant if they are driving forward key changes. Now, we made recommendations for change. We made recommendations to the government, to employers, and to unions. And I won't get into much detail, but I'll kind of give you a high-level idea of what we recommended. So we recommended the government introduce mandatory disability pay gap reporting for all employers with more than 50 employees. And we said this must include a duty on employers to produce targeted action plans, identifying the steps that they will take to address any gaps identified, including ensuring disabled workers with invisible impairments feel confident in completing workforce and workplace equality monitoring. To employers, we said that they shouldn't wait for the government to introduce disability pay gap reporting, that they should start taking steps now to identify any gaps they have and to address them. And we basically asked unions to start working with employers to review disability monitoring processes and policies to ensure any barriers to disabled workers sharing their monitoring information were addressed, identified, and removed. You know, we've started to drive forward this change. But, you know, if we're talking about the campaigning element, and that's really what I wanted to talk to you about here today, what I did when kind of developing this campaign, you know, I mentioned earlier it was launched on the 4th of November, and that was because it was the day disabled people stopped getting paid for the year. We identified 4 priorities. Priority 1 was building the campaign infrastructure. Priority 2 was building the movement. Priority 3 was about communicating the message, and priority 4 was about reaching key influencers. Now, if we look at priority 1, we took a long-term view that this issue wasn't going to be addressed quickly. It wasn't going to be a quick win for us. After all, we know that we have gender pay gap reporting already, and the gender pay gap is not shrinking. So we saw this as being a really long-term aim. That was why it was important that we established this kind of infrastructure. And what we did was we established an annual date that all kind of interested groups could rally around. So the 4th of November, this was the first year we've held it. We will be holding Disability Pay Gap Day every year until, I guess, it's addressed. So this was year 1. We also know that kind of getting other groups involved in campaigning it can be difficult, not because they don't have the will, but because they don't have time. We're all time poor, and they don't have time to kind of create their own bespoke materials. So what we did was we provided media packs with images and template tweets to our affiliated unions, to disabled people's organizations, key academics, and key groups who had an interest in this area. And earlier in my slides, you started to see what some of those images looked like. And what you might note is that they don't have the TUC branded on them. And it's not usual for us to kind of give away free materials, but what we know in establishing this first day was that that was kind of our key priority. And organizations like to share materials that aren't branded and don't take people away from their Twitter feed or the Facebook feed. And so what we did was we kind of provided unbranded materials just to really establish this day and to get people using their social media platforms to make noise about it. And I feel like that's really helped us establish Disability Pay Gap Day, and we'll look to see how successful that has been in November this year, when we kind of look to see what changes happened over the last 12 months. Now, building the movement is priority 2. And for us, that was really bringing on board our 48, 50 affiliated unions and making sure they were kind of backing this. And also involved us working with disabled people's organizations, or deaf and disabled people's organizations. So we took a lot of time to reach out to grassroots activists and not just trade unions, but trade union members, to get them to tell their story. Again, it's about rooting the experience of what the pay gap is in real life. And what I've done is I've shared with Darren and Michelle sort of like a little document with key links, and on that document you will find a link to some of the materials that have been created. Some people went really above and beyond, creating like little video clips explaining what the pay gap meant to them. That was really very important as well. And then let's have a quick look at communicating the message. So I worked with my kind of comms team to really agree a set of short and quick accessible findings. Those are the ones I've highlighted to you. Because when campaigning, actually people don't have a lot of time for in-depth analysis of the pay gap. They want to understand the high-level impact and be able to work on it. So we agreed a set of quick, short, accessible findings that were good for social media, TV and print news, and also getting those messaging into specialist press like the Disability News Service. And it was quite effective. The launch of this was covered by Channel 5 News, who built up a bespoke package to cover it, and it was kind of covered by the usual press and news outlets as well. And finally, priority 4, reaching key influencers. It was hugely important as well, not just for enabling the launch of the campaign, but for keeping the campaign alive and going forward. So we really reached out to kind of parliamentarians and government and academics and disabled people to speak about their own rights. And we really started to establish this campaign within that psyche. So, for example, we are in close and constant contact with academics in this area, and also with the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Disability, who also really are taking this forward. I think Lord Shin Quinn, who is a Lord in the House of Lords, proposed bespoke legislation to try and highlight the need for pay gap reporting. So I think we'll continue campaigning on this. You know, and again, like, just to say, what we know is that this is a key area of interest to disabled workers for us to address. So we will continue pushing on it. And I can tell you that although the Disabled Workers Conference has been cancelled for this year, we're still trying to execute our democratic function. So we have got motions in from affiliates, and some of those motions are about us continuing our work on the pay gap. Now, I also thought we'd talk a bit about the LGBT sexual harassment research. And that was launched almost a year ago. It was the world's first, and it was launched for IDAHOBIT, which is International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. And just as an FYI, that is happening on Sunday. And also just to say that, you know, I use this flag with intent, and what I am trying to communicate here to you and to everybody is that when we do any work on these issues, we do not just consider the group. So we don't just consider disabled people, and we don't just consider LGBT people, but we consider LGBT people who are disabled, LGBT people who are people of color. And I was really using that flag to try and signal to you that our work is inclusive of all, tries to be as inclusive as of all workers who have that protected strand. Now, just before we kind of get into the LGBT sexual harassment research findings, I thought it would be useful to explain a bit about why we did it. So I did not have, say, a motion from the LGBT conference saying, look at sexual harassment. I didn't have that. But what I did have was a really strong indication that something was happening to LGBT people from an earlier piece of work we did, which was called The Cost of Being Out at Work. And that research was kind of encouraged by our LGBT committee. And what also I had was intelligence from affiliated unions. So I had equality officers telling me that some of their LGBT people and members were experiencing things which they thought were sexual harassment. And so to kind of get a better idea of if I should be pursuing this, I held a roundtable with one of our affiliated unions, bringing together their LGBT members to kind of discuss what their experiences were. And that really confirmed that there was something happening, and it wasn't good. But this was further compounded by the fact that the Government Equality Office, they did their LGBT survey and they released their findings. And within that report, which is a really great report, it found that only 1% of LGBT people had experienced sexual harassment and violence. And that was very much in contradiction with the intelligence I was getting. So really, I think it's a fantastic resource, but on this issue, it was wrong. So what I did was I kind of wanted to understand a bit about what they did to get that 1%, and I looked at their question, and they asked a single question, and that did not contextualize what sexual harassment is. And what we know from our past research at the TUC is that if you don't contextualize what it is, you get a 1% result. And that's why a very similar approach was, the government took a similar approach when trying to find out about sexual harassment of women. They asked the same question, and you will not be surprised that also found that women had only a 1% report of being sexually harassed at work. So you can see the question is flawed, because actually what we know and lots of research shows is that half of women experience sexual harassment at work. So this really spurred me on to look more into it. And so, what we did was we commissioned a polling company to run an online survey for us. And it was not a call for evidence, it was quantitative research. We polled over 1,000 LGBT people, and we asked them about specific experiences of sexual harassment. The who, what, where, why, when, and hows. And later on, what we did was we commissioned a top-up poll of an additional 150 LGBT women, as we felt the natural fallout from the first poll didn't give us sufficient number of women to tell us what was happening. And so, although it was natural and it was statistically significant, we just thought, let's top this up because we don't want to underrepresent women in this sample. To qualify for the poll, you have to have worked within the last 5 years and be of working age, which is kind of our usual way of approaching things like this. And if you work in this area, you will know that we cannot weight the poll. No one knows exactly what the size and makeup of the LGBT population is. So, what we really needed was sufficient numbers to draw out the experiences of LGBT people. And kind of one of my main concerns also was when I was getting tenders in to run the poll, all of the organizations were telling me that they could not guarantee that they would get me enough LGBT people of color, or they would get enough LGBT disabled people, or they would be able to get enough trans men and women. There was only one company, and they guaranteed me everything and said that they would do their best on trans, to get a representative trans sample. And I guess it's just because, again, it's a very small community and a lot of work like this hasn't been done. So I went with the company that guaranteed me the most and widest sample. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get into the findings, and I should give you a trigger warning here because they are quite upsetting. And so just, I think I want everyone to be prepared for what I'm about to say. So, just giving you a trigger warning now. Okay, we're going to move on. So the GEO sample, the GEO survey found that LGBT people experienced 1% sexual harassment and sexual violence. My report found that 7 out of 10 LGBT respondents had experienced some form of sexual harassment in their working life. That's a far cry from the 1%. 7 in 10. That's basically all of us. And what I have here is I've kind of broken it down by the different types of behaviors, and that's what you need to do to understand this, is you break it down into the behaviors that qualify as sexual harassment. And I won't go through this slide because actually it's quite detailed, but I'll just pull out some of the findings. So it found that 4 in 10 LGBT workers had heard comments of a sexual nature about their sexual orientation, and 3 in 10 had heard comments about their gender identity. And just to kind of put that into context, one person told us they had disclosed that they were bi pansexual and had a male colleague come up to them in the pub and said that they must have had great threesomes And this is a quote. He said, "My male partner must be lucky," and laughed. It wasn't funny. It felt gross. I felt unsafe, and as per usual, my sexuality had been reduced to the sexual pleasure of others, something dirty. And that was submitted by a 26 to 35-year-old bisexual worker. So, you know, we're always trying to put this into real life experiences. And also, just under half of the respondents had heard unwelcome jokes of a sexual nature, and 4 in 10 had reported hearing colleagues make unwelcome questions or comments about their sex life. And that's kind of, are you the train or the tunnel? Or has your partner sucked you off over lunch? And again, sorry, I just want to be clear. These are quotes from the research. I'm not just making random sexual comments. These are quotes of the things that people were experiencing. Now, when we did the research, we also found, we also polled on things which are sexual harassment and are also criminal offenses. So those are things like unwanted touching and rape. And I'm about to move to a slide. So again, a trigger warning because it's not great. So we felt it was really important here. Sorry, let me make sure I move your slide. We felt it was really important here to divide these experiences by men and women. And that's because when we looked at the research, what we found was that they had statistically different experiences. So whereas with the first set of behaviors, we thought that they were similar enough to report on them together, here we really felt it was necessary to draw out the differences. And so what we found was that over a third of women had reported unwanted touching, and that includes things like placing hands on the lower back or knee, and so had 1 in 5 men. We had 1 in 5 women reporting experiencing sexual assault, and that included unwanted touching of the breasts, buttocks, or genitals, or attempts to kiss, as had 3 in 25 men. And one of the bigger ones we found was that 1 in 8 LGBT women had experienced serious sexual assault or rape at work, as had 1 in 14 men. And that last statistic is really important and particularly disheartening because we've done similar polling like this quite a while ago. Well, no, I think 2016 on women's experiences. And at that time, women reported 1% of women reported being seriously sexually assaulted or raped at work. So this is a significant difference between that poll and also a difference between what LGBT women were experiencing and GBT men. And what we can tell from the qualitative research and evidence that was put forward to us is that a lot of women were experiencing verbal sexual harassment from men at work. And that included kind of threats of unwanted sexual activity aimed at turning them straight. And then when we look at this, what we see is that actually sometimes those weren't just threats. Actually, those threats were happening in real life. And that's kind of linked to things and concepts like corrective rape and attempts to try and cure people of their sexual orientation. And so, you know, it's quite serious and very disheartening. I've said disheartening about 4 times, but every time I get to this point, I am still stunned and depressed. And there's also kind of a strange emotional toll that comes from reading 400 responses of experiences at work. Now, what I mentioned earlier was that what we try to do at the trade union movement and at the TUC is be as representative as possible. And so for me, it was really, really important that I was able to discuss lesbian and gay men experiences, bi, men, and women's experiences, people of color experiences, both men and women, and disabled LGBT people's experiences, both men and women. One of my biggest disappointments with this research was that while the polling company did get me a sufficient sample of trans people to talk about their experiences, they were not able to get me a sample of trans men that was large enough to draw out what their experiences were, and that continues to be one of my biggest disappointments with this research. Well, actually, it's my only disappointment with this research. But what we did do in our recommendations is that we told the government that they must do this research and they must get a sufficient sample of trans men. So just to talk a bit about what else the research found, hope you're all still with me. So one of the interesting things we found was about reporting. So we found that 2/3 of LGBT respondents who had been sexually harassed or sexually assaulted at work had not reported the most recent incident to their employer. And there were a kind of a number of reasons for this, but the one that really stood out for me was that 1/4 of respondents said they did not report being sexually harassed at work because it would have revealed their sexual orientation and or gender identity. So that's a very bespoke finding for LGBT people. And I've said a couple of times that this has been, these findings are depressing, but there was a glimmer of hope for me, and that was that union members were more likely than non-union members to report their experiences of sexual harassment to their employer, and they were more likely to say it was taken seriously and dealt with well. So again, I think that shows that the strength of collective bargaining and solidarity. So union members also had higher levels of satisfaction with the action that employers took in response to reported sexual harassment. So I think that's a little good plug for being a trade union member. Now, this picture is random. I have no idea why I've chosen it. I think I just liked the fact that it was filled with different colored triangles. But I will just tell you a bit about the recommendations we made, again, keeping it high level. So we made recommendations to 4 groups: government, regulatory bodies, employers, and trade unions. And what we said to the government was that they should introduce a new legal duty to prevent sexual harassment. We wanted a statutory code of practice on sexual harassment and harassment at work, and we wanted them to strengthen the legislation to tackle third-party harassment. For regulatory bodies, we wanted them to strengthen the roles of the EHRC and Health and Safety Executive. We wanted employers to make all workplace policies LGBT inclusive, to review existing policies to make sure they were inclusive of the LGBT community as well, and adopt zero tolerance approach. And for unions, we wanted them to be supportive of this and to review their own guidance and training, and to empower their reps to review employers' guidance and training. So I guess the question is, what has the work achieved? So I would say it's achieved some of the things we really wanted it to do. We have helped LGBT plus workers understand what sexual harassment is. So one of the things I forgot to mention earlier was that when talking about sexual harassment with LGBT trade union members, they would all describe experiences that were clearly sexual harassment as defined by the law, but didn't have the language to understand that the experience was sexual harassment. So we've been helping LGBT workers understand that, and we will continue to do so. We have informed LGBT workers of their rights. We've had impact on the LGBT movement globally. So this research, I know, has appeared in reports in Australia, in the ILO convention discussions. Like, it's really making the rounds and really hopefully helping to make positive change. And we've seen the statutory code of statutory code of practice on sexual harassment and harassment at work. It has been produced. We are still working on some other policy areas. We still want the preventative duty, and so this continues to be live. But also positively, we've got all of our unions and affiliates on board with this, and it's really helped strengthen the TUC's tie with LGBT groups like Gallup, who are a sexual violence and hate crime group, and the LGBT Foundation. And on the day when we launched it, which was Ida Hobbit, it was covered by the BBC, who created a bespoke package. But yes, there is still a long way to go, and this could not be better shown by some of the tweets that went out as a result of the research being launched. And what you hear, what I put here are some of them. I mean, I think these individuals thought they were being horrible, and they were, but the reality is this gives me further leverage to demand for change. So what we have here is one person, a Rob random number, saying, it's not right, but I've worked with some girls that are lesbians, and they've caused problems when things haven't gone their way and played the LGBT card and got people in trouble. Okay. We have someone saying, this is preparing them for eternity in hell. We have the good old, it's called the workplace banter. Incidentally, the 2016 report into sexual harassment of women was called It's Not Just Banter. So that's quite funny. But, I think we still have a way to go to kind of really change public attitudes. But if there's one thing I'd like to tell you about this, is that you do not do this alone, and we aren't doing it alone. So the TUC are committed to continuing to address this, and we pulled together a bunch of trade unions and charity organizations and political pressure lobbying groups to join our This Is Not Working campaign. What you can see on the screen is the 3 statistics. It talks about half of women being sexually harassed, 68% of LGBT people, which is my finding, and it talks about underreporting. And what's really important to note is this group on the right of the screen. So I don't think it quite came across, but what I did was I tried to pull out the different organizations and highlight them in different colors, but that's not quite translated in the screen. But what you have here are trade unions. You have women's groups like End Violence Against Women and the Fawcett Society. You have LGBT charity groups calling for this, like Gallup and Stonewall and LGBT Foundation, and It's Not Just a Ball Game. And you have kind of wider groups like Amnesty International, business groups like Business in the Community. The groups who are prepared and have come behind and galvanized to try and address this is wide. And it's really paying dividends. So while the report is, while we're still working to really address this, we're not doing it alone. And it's a group of us working together to try and make workplaces safer for everybody. I've probably run over time because I am quite verbose. So I'll be quick here. I said I would quickly talk about COVID-19, and I won't do this in great detail. Trade unions are working across the board to try and ensure their workers are protected. We were there protecting workers going into lockdown. We were securing workplaces and giving out, what we did was secured workplaces and gave workers a voice. We've been working constructively with employers and the government, but fundamentally we were protecting workers. And we do things that look outside of the workplace as well. So we've been empowering our reps to understand how they can support their members who are going through a bereavement. We've been supporting reps to identify and help victims of domestic violence. We are here, and our work is not just in the workplace, but it's much broader. And I know that my comms team would hit me if I did not also mention the fact that we were there ensuring the furlough scheme was created. We were campaigning for it way before the government were thinking about it. And it's trade unions that ensured that workers could be furloughed with 80% of their wage up to £2,500. So I hope that helps. I did have a little live clip of Francis O'Grady on the right of the screen. It doesn't look like it's going to work, probably because it's embedded as an image and I'm technically not that great. But it was her message on May Day, and that just kind of helped hit home some of the things that the trade union movement have done throughout this crisis. I guess what we're saying now is it's never been a better time to be a trade union member, and it's not too late to join a trade union. So I just make these final points, and then maybe we can go to Q&A. Trade unions' reason for existing is to protect workers. There is strength in solidarity. If you want to change the workplace, become an active trade union member. And what we do is we deliver fundamental change for workers, but that requires collective voice, and that requires trade union members to empower us to speak on their behalf. And thank you very much for all listening. That's my presentation. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Quinn. That was a really fascinating talk. I definitely learned a lot. Took a depressing turn, like you said, but kind of came back into something a bit more hopeful there. And so I hope everyone will join me in kind of virtually giving you a round of applause. I know that's the kind of downside of keynoting online, is that you don't hear the applause, but just imagine it, I guess. So you mentioned that you have a bunch of links that you've sent through to me and Darren. So we will be sharing those in the forum, and I think Darren's tweeted some of them already. One of the important ones, or Darren's come in and he's adding some tweets here, some links here. I put in one about joining a union. So if you want to scroll back up, you can find the TUC's link to finding your union. Okay, I have had a couple of questions through, so I will ask them of you now. So someone would like to ask you, Quinn, if any of the research on LGBTQ people included / collected data on non-binary people's experiences.
That's a really good question, and it's also one of my disappointments. So the LGBT sexual harassment report did not include non-binary people's experiences, and I did ask about that when polling, and I think every polling company looked at me completely blankly, like it just wasn't feasible. And also I think I was further constrained by the finances, of course. I had a limited budget, but it is one of the things that we know we need to be better on, which is why we are going to be releasing shortly a kind of bit of digital content on non-binary members for reps to kind of upskill them on what non-binary is and how they can support their non-binary members. That was something I wanted to launch on the 17th, which is the Sunday, but unfortunately I've been unable to because of the pandemic. So what I will say to anyone listening is that the TUC is going to be running a month-long campaign looking to address LGBT hate crime sometime this year when we're further away from the pandemic. And when we do that, we will be including issues around non-binary members and what reps can do to support them. But at the moment, we haven't been able to do any quantitative work on supporting non-binary members. But we'll be looking to substitute that with some qual work in the future.
Okay, hopefully that answered that person's question. We also had a question about where can you get a copy of the report, but that Darren has shared those links to reports in the chat, and of course we will make sure to share the list of links as well on our website when we post the recording of the session as well. The other question that I have is, what are trade unions doing to support and represent disabled workers faced with returning to work as lockdown ends?
Well, that's a really good question. So I should say that during this crisis, the TUC has released further Q&As and advice and guidance to reps on how to ensure that their members got reasonable adjustments if asked to work from home, and how to ensure their members got reasonable adjustments if asked to work or continue going to work. So what we've done is, first of all, we started with something a bit more demanding of government. So the Women's Equality and Select Committee have recently put out an inquiry asking about the impact of the coronavirus and returning to work on different protected groups. We had a large section on disabled workers and what we thought the government should do in the first 3 months and then in 6 months' time to ensure things were put in place. We've also, on Monday, I guess it's, Monday of this week, we held an equality officers meeting, bringing together equality officers across all of our affiliates to just talk about disabled workers' experiences, to understand the things that are happening across different sectors, to share that understanding and to talk about ways of addressing it. So I would guess the high level answer is we know there is something we need to do. We are gathering information and making plans on how we can best support our disabled members. The other thing I should say is that our democratic processes are staying in place. So the Disabled Workers Conference has been cancelled. We are still going through and running our democratic principles to understand what those key issues are from this year. And we will be ensuring that one of the motions that has been submitted is voted on, selected by disabled people to go to our Congress to become trade union policy across the board. So we're still kind of there working and looking at it. And I would say continue watching this space because hopefully we'll be kind of getting to a place where we can be giving wider advice to all affiliates on this.
Great, thank you so much. I have one final question before we need to wrap up. So this person has said, to give context to their question, they were part of a trade union over 5 years ago and had a bad experience with those in the union, which led them to leave. Do you feel that there has been any progress in regards to institutional racism and wider issues of intersectionality within the union, or unions, I guess?
Can you just repeat that last part? I kind of missed it.
Sure. Do you feel there has been any progress in regards to institutional racism or wider issues of intersectionality within the union?
Well, I obviously can't speak to this person's experience, but it sounds like they had a negative experience on the grounds of race or their intersectional identity. I think the trade union movement is made up of, well, the groups that I represent are 5.6 million people, and sometimes, we're all not singing from the same hymn sheet. And I think we're doing a lot to try and address racism, both in the external environment and within our movement, to make sure that all members feel appreciated. And that's why what a lot of unions have, and we have, are democratic structures for people of color to come forward and tell us what their issues are and to address it. I'm very sorry that this person's had a negative experience. I don't think it's representative of the trade. From what you've said, I don't think it's representative of the trade union movement as a whole. Yeah.
Okay. I don't have any more questions that have been messaged to me, and I've had a quick look through the public chat and there don't seem to be any other questions, but there are a lot of thank yous, appreciation for your presentation, appreciation for your talk, and yeah, I'd very much like to echo that. It was really great to have you. I'm really pleased that you agreed to keynote the conference. And yeah, once again, let's say thank you to Quinn.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your support. I hope I didn't bore you too much.
Not at all, not at all. I think if you can see the public chat, you'll see lots of people saying thank you to you and expressing their appreciation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to take a break now. So it is just about 10:35. Our next round of sessions start at 10:45. So you can take a break, get away from your screen for a little bit if you'd like, or come and hang out in the water cooler room where I will also be shortly. And then the next round of sessions start at 10:45 a.m. But thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us for our first session. And yeah, you can log out now and take a break.